Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Substack show, which we're doing once a week and are going to try to do even more. And of course, I'm very excited because I love to talk to Steve, whether we're on Substack or we're just chewing the fat over the phone or grabbing a cup of coffee or something stronger. I wanted to say Steve is obviously co-founder of the Lincoln Project, a political strategist, founder of The Warning, was once a Republican. He and I met when he was running the John McCain presidential campaign in 2008. We bonded over Sarah Palin, which we don't.
Hold on 1 second, Katie. I have my black lab Tucker was crying at the door.
Aw, well,
He wants in, Katie.
can you show us Tucker real quick?
I can't. He's walked away here
Oh,
to get on his couch.
did you name him after Tucker Carlson?
I did not. I did not. He was a refugee, if you will, from seeing eye dog school. He flunked out. So I
Oh.
got him. I got him when he was 10 months old, but he's 14 now.
Oh, wow.
Pretty tough.
14,
Yeah,
14 years old?
14-year-old black lab, great dog.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, Steve, as I said, it's always great to see you. So much to talk about. Since you were late and kind of forgot about me, you were on a call. We're going to just jam it in real quickly. And I really feel like we have to start with the Middle East because, as you know, President Trump was on the cover of Time magazine. It's being heralded in many quarters by this tremendous accomplishment. On the other hand, I was listening to Rick Stengel say someplace that most diplomats underpromise and overdeliver, and he felt that Donald Trump was overpromising, and the fear is he's going to underdeliver, which I thought was a pretty succinct way of saying the proof. The devil's in the details, and the proof will be in the pudding, if you will. So I'm just curious to hear your perspective on this big Mideast victory lap that President Trump was taking earlier this week.
It's extraordinary that in the aftermath of a war that has rubbleized a geography, killed at least 60,000 people inside of it, and caused so much trauma in Israel that in the end, I guess the war, well, it was about Trump, right? And if you look at the magazine covers and you read the pronouncements, what was the war about? It was a victory for Donald. And it's obscene. I could show you a Life magazine from 1946. Incidentally, inside of that Life magazine that has the Palestinian on the cover. And inside the centerfold shows Jerusalem. And inside that magazine is the photograph of all the top tier A Nazis laid out in their caskets after they got hung. That peace in the Middle East is not a function of Donald's ego. And anybody who thinks that a durable peace will be the fruit of a corrupt commercial transaction between Donald and all of these Arab thugs in a Bitcoin transaction has rocks in their head.
Well, talk to me more about calling it a corrupt commercial transaction. Tell me why you're characterizing it
Well,
as that.
that's what the Abraham courts, in essence, were. That discounted the presence of the Palestinians at all. In the end, there's 7.5 million Palestinians and there's 7.5 million Jews in a tight geographic proximity with a 2 millennia contestation over the land. And the notion that this will be figured out in Riyadh or in Dubai or by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff in either of those places is absurd. And so there is a temporary ceasefire. Hamas emerged from underground and began executing all of its competitors. We haven't really seen what Gaza looks like inside, but the issue's not about Trump. And the egotism and the celebration, and I can explain the Time magazine cover. It's owned by another billionaire, Mark Benioff. He's quieter, and he didn't make the first round cut. He didn't make it into the front row for the inauguration. But whether it's Ellison at CBS, whether it's Bob Iger at ABC, what the American people are served is a thin gruel that's dressed up as news. There is no independence in these companies. There is no integrity in the morning editorial meeting. And so this is politics. And the politics dictate if you are at a giant corporation that owns a news division, that you celebrate Trump. And that's why Trump is being celebrated, because not on the basis of a real achievement, but on the basis of the corporate strategy, which is now's the time to celebrate him at the proverbial point of a gun. And that's what's happening.
But it's not just the media, is it, Steve? I mean, I talked to many people, even Andrew Ross Sorkin was like, he's doing this in some terrible things, but then I look at what he has done in the Mideast, and I find just anecdotally, a lot of people are, Steve, giving him credit for at least, you know, bringing a temporary end to the war and laying out some kind of plan. I'm not saying I am, I'm just hearing it. And so I know
I
what you're saying about
I
these media
I
entities.
I think maybe Andrew Ross Sorkin then knows a lot more about economics than he does the Middle East. And I'll say that. I mean, I say that with no malice. Maybe he doesn't understand anything about the Middle East. The reality is that Bibi Netanyahu profoundly divided Israeli society. And he projected the type of weakness that's a provocation. And Hamas was provoked by the division and the weakness, and they attacked. And they slaughtered 1,200 kids who went to a concert. And Israel went to war for 2 years. And Netanyahu is opposed by about 2/3 of his country.
Hmm.
And his political calculation has been that so long as the war goes on, I get to stay as prime minister. And he so closely tied himself to Donald Trump that he put himself into the position that Trump owns him. And what Donald Trump appreciates is that inside his MAGA base, there is a tremendous schism. There are people who don't understand why we're bailing out Argentinian farmers when American farmers have jumped to the head of the suicide list because the soybean market has collapsed. And there's a big part of his political coalition that is sick of the war. Marjorie Taylor Greene understands and represents that position. And so Trump gave an order to Netanyahu because Trump is in a position to give an order to exactly one person on the planet. And his name is Bibi Netanyahu. And he stopped the bombing. But I just wonder if I think about that Life magazine with the Palestinian on the cover, wonder what happened to that man's grandchildren and his great grandchildren. I wonder how many terrorists have been produced out of the rubble in Gaza. That what came out of this is peace, and the people who pronounce it work on CNBC. No,
Steve, I found watching that speech he gave at the Knesset fascinating. and even that part where he was saying they should pardon Bibi Netanyahu. Do you remember that part?
There,
It was really, I mean, and it felt like everyone in the Knesset he had them eating out of the palm of his hand.
Israel will rue the day that it has yoked itself in this country to Donald Trump. There is nothing that the state of Israel could ever have done that will undermine its security more than by becoming a partisan cause in the United States and celebrating Donald Trump as Cyrus the Great. And
You don't think
Bibi Netanyahu accomplished that. And I'm somebody who's a converted Jew, who's married to a Jewish family, and the idea that in the Jewish diaspora around the world that Donald Trump is a hero, or that the peace is durable, or that Israeli security hasn't been compromised by the yoking of Israel to MAGA, I think is delusional.
that you mentioned a durable peace. I mean, already, as you said earlier, there's been signs Hamas is executing its rival. It's reportedly Israel has attacked Palestinians, the released Palestinians returning to their homes. This 20-point deal and this council that's going to oversee Gaza with Tony Blair and Donald Trump in charge. I mean, talk about your skepticism about the durability of this whole thing.
It was as if it was architected by Meatloaf on The Apprentice. I'm very serious about this. It is not real. And it is not real in the way that it is not real that Portland is at war or that Chicago is at war or that the economy is doing great. It is not real.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about this chasm in MAGA land, I guess, with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen and Megyn Kelly. And I guess Michelle Goldberg wrote about it, about kind of, and ostensibly that Charlie Kirk was starting to pull away from Israel. Can you tell us kind of all the machinations that are going inside MAGA land that are focused on Israel?
Yes. Let me well, let me start. Well, the place to start with that directly to that question is Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are anti-Semites, raging anti-Semites. Tucker Carlson's a person who's had people on his show that hold the position that Winston Churchill is the great villain of the Second World War and that Adolf Hitler is misunderstood. And you see the sickness inside MAGA, the text between all of these young Republicans.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you
This
about that.
isn't the exception. This is the tip of the iceberg.
In fact, just
And
so we tell everyone, in case they haven't seen this Politico story, basically there were I guess, tons of texts over what you guys the past 7 months or so that were leaked to Politico with the most sort of hateful, anti-Semitic, racist, nasty comments, and somebody even saying, "Oh, we're screwed if these ever got leaked." And it turned out these were all sort of young Republicans, right? They were from Kansas and New York and all these different places. And I think it was what you're saying about the culture inside the GOP. It was 7 months that these had been exchange, and then they leaked. So I just wanted to give people context. But when you saw those texts, Steve, I imagine you weren't that surprised.
No, I mean, it's the least surprising thing ever. I mean, these are the children of Trump. This is 10 years of marination in this cancer is what it is. Um, I don't know why anybody would pay attention to anything that Candace Owens says. But the Daily Beast covers every word she says every day. And so the worst of the worst are covered as culturally relevant, and our politics shines a light on these sick people in our culture. And I guess the reason that that's part of the political coverage is it speaks to the sickness in our culture. I think Megyn Kelly is in a different category than these people. But she is part of a group that were, and I put Barry Weiss in this, although it's a little bit different.
That Barry Weiss being the new head of CBS News.
Very famously resigned from the New York Times, and I don't discount at all the misery of her experience at the New York Times, and I believe she was bullied and treated terribly and abused by the woke newsroom, as she described it. And it so damaged her and her judgment that, honest to God, she looks around the world and she thinks that the great crisis is Greta Thunberg, not the American fascist movement. Megyn Kelly, well, I think Roger Ailes took one look at Megyn and said, get her in the elevator up to my office. And Megyn Kelly comes up through the Fox network. Megyn Kelly, though, doesn't dream of being Roger's girl at Fox. She has bigger aspirations. She wants your job. And so Megyn Kelly makes it. And Megyn Kelly's on a big network, on a daytime show. And she lasted a couple months before they wrote her a check and said, Megyn, here's $50 million.
I think it was
Go away.
69. I think it was 69 million, but go on.
It was here's $70 million. Just go away. Go away. This didn't work. And I think the rage and the failure and the rejection of that deformed her inside and has yoked her to this cause that denigrated her. And I think psychologically, it's a very important thing to appreciate about American politics. The leaders of the Democratic Party never stop judging the American voter. And primarily, the judgment is the voter worthy of us? And in most instances, the answer to the question is no. The voter is racist. The voter is this. And if a Democrat loses, it's because they weren't good enough, right, for the low voter. MAGA is different. There's only one requirement for membership. Trump's the leader. And the leader will never, ever judge you. When these young Republicans are called out talking about black people as monkeys, talking about let's gas the Jews, let's do all of this, does J.D. Vance go out and condemn it? He defends it by pointing out, hey, this guy running for attorney general in Virginia said this, and therefore this is okay. Don't worry about it. You'll never be judged. You're one of us, MAGA forever. And so when you think about these little Eichmanns, you have to come back to bring it full circle when you read those texts, because it validates what Matthew Dowd was fired for. Violent ideas, hateful ideas,
And speech.
right, lead to hateful words, lead to hateful actions. And this is a central lesson of history over and over and over again, whether
I
it's in Rwanda, whether it's in Nazi Germany, or whether it's in 2020's America.
I interviewed Matthew Dowd here on Substack after he was fired, and I was really surprised at MSNBC for doing that. And then I don't know, Steve, if we talked about it, and then Comcast sending a letter to its employees on top of that, basically saying the whole Charlie Kirk thing was
Obscene,
it was what?
obscene.
I mean, listen, I think it was just such a head scratcher because nobody seemed to know. I mean, I think they were trying to cover it and they needed to cover it as a violent, political violence, and it needed to be condemned. But I mean, now didn't they have yesterday was National Charlie Kirk Day or whatever, and his wife, his widow, got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Uh, the person he was when he was alive was totally suppressed in so many different places. Even Ezra Klein said he did politics the right way. It was a very strange thing to witness, and the way he was deified and canonized is still it's just gross.
Sure is.
Let me ask you a little bit about the Democrats. We're going to be talking to Jacob Soboroff because he's been covering these ICE raids, and there's been so many incidents. And he's been in Chicago, and I want him to tell us what's going on the ground there because it's hard to keep up with all the outrageous things that are happening on American streets. But um, the government shutdown. Of course, you've got the Democratic narrative, you've got the Republican narrative. And I'm curious how you see, as a strategist, how you see this kind of landing in America. Is it just whoever side you're on, you're believing?
Well, listen, I think that there's a lot of people who have argued with a lot of passion and intensity about things that don't deserve a lot of passion and intensity, right? It's been over the last 20 years a lot of denunciation about who's a good American on the basis of what number in the tax code they think should be the highest marginal rate. Right? The Democrats, for the record, were 39% and the Bush Republicans were 35%. That's the big difference. That's not what we're talking about here. And so the idea that we're going to have masked federal agents running wild, assaulting American citizens, the Save America movement, which I'm a member of, we have deployed Liberty vans in Chicago where we have camera crews, we have priests, chaplains, we have lawyers, we have veterans aboard, and we caught ICE attacking an American citizen yesterday on camera. And you see that ICE agent is lacking discipline. You see these guys in their videos, the constant profanity, the fumbling with the weapons. They're ill-trained thugs that should not be operating. And so when you look at what's happening in the country right now, 20 years from now, are we going to look back in October of 2025 and say there was a great healthcare crisis? The Obamacare subsidies were going to go away? That's not the crisis at hand. The crisis at hand is a mass man crisis. And I want to say something to everyone who's listening to the question you asked. Politics is tough. It's tough business, and there's a lot at stake. Donald Trump and the Obama health care premiums is something that falls on them and their voters. The position of the Democratic Party right now is functionally to bail out MAGA on an issue that can destroy the autocratic movement. And MAGA, Trump, no matter what, they have to fold on the question of these healthcare premiums because they can't survive it. And yet, in the game of chicken, the Democrats will be the ones who fold here. And two, when they do, all of the leverage will be gone, as it was in March when Chuck Schumer did what he did then, for Democrats to go out and to demand the masked agents stop snatching people off the street. If you look at what's happening in the country right now, what would you shut the government down for and hold the line about? It's over that. It's over the abuse of the army in the cities with weapons pointed at the people. The ballot box is the right place to deal with the issue of the healthcare premiums. And by the way, if Donald Trump and MAGA bankrupt half the country that doesn't have $400 available, the one group of people who should be most disinterested about helping them are the leaders of the Democratic Party, who can't win an election against these people. And that's a very serious thing. So no, the Democratic strategy to me does not make sense. It looks like it was manufactured by the type of people that think Ezra Klein is a genius, that get up, and I mean this, right? Like that lack common sense. Like Charlie Kirk did not do it the right way. And the Democratic Party is filled with people like Ezra Klein and
Well,
and people who hail him as a strategic genius. And there's story after story. And the price of this is we're losing the country.
well, let me ask you a couple questions that people watching this is. One, why do you think the Democrats are going to fold? And B, someone just mentioned Schumer saying it's a wet noodle strategy. And my final question in the series of three is, how can the Democrats reinvent themselves, reinvigorate the party, be, a better foe against what's happening in this country? So why don't you start first? Why do you think
There,
the
there,
Democrats are going
there,
to fold?
well, because past is prologue, and they don't have a position that they're able to maintain. I don't think over the long run. So we'll see. They just don't have the stomach for the fight in the races. And I could talk about this for an hour, but they're going to fold. It will not be MAGA that folds here. And when they do fold, and they will, um, there will be no leverage to make a demand that the most abusive stuff stop. Here's the number two piece. Everything that has happened right through this second in this country, and I'm not looking for a certificate, a ribbon, or a trophy, but I said exactly what would happen. And I said it for the first time in very early 2022. When I've talked about the disaster of Joe Biden in 2024, in 2025, it has not been to kick the shit out of people for the decisions they made that we can't do anything about. The reason has been to prepare people to comprehend the next decisions that have to be made that we can still make. And that has to do with Chuck Schumer. There are 45 Democratic senators, and it doesn't matter what any of them say about any issue at any moment, because the collective judgment of that group of people is a farce. in October of 2025. Because at the front of that room is Chuck Schumer. And he's not a capable man. He's not competent to the moment. And the one thing that surely has to really lift the spirits of MAGA every hour of every day is the people that face off across it. And knowing that they never go away, they never leave. And so would the country be better off with the Democratic Party led by John Ossoff? Of course. Is Hakeem Jeffries up to the job? Of course not. And so the first requirement of being a good Democrat in America in the fascist era is to make believe and pretend. And just like the good MAGAs line up behind their leaders, the good Democrats line up behind their leaders. The difference is the MAGA leaders are wolves and the Democratic leaders are sheep. And the Democratic voters are lemmings and the MAGA voters are little Nazis and predators. And you have a vast middle of the country that is betwixt and between the appeasers and the predators. And here we are. You have two profoundly corrupt institutions. And anybody who says, oh, no, the Democratic Party's not corrupt. Well, it's corrupt enough to have lost an election 2 out of 3 to MAGA.
Corrupt or ineffective? Corrupt or ineffective, Steve?
It is corrupt. It's ineffective. When the Attorney General candidate nominee in Virginia is talking about killing the kids of the Republican speaker, I would argue that that's corrupt. That a Menendez, when Chuck Schumer comes out and says, no, he was a faithful servant to the people of New Jersey, I would say that it's even deeper than corrupt. It's a rot. It's a rot. And I'm just waiting, right, for the next shout down by all these people in Washington, right, when the next unelectable candidate is put forward and the demand that everybody get in line. Because I know that there is at least enough of us, meaning me, people like me. Maybe we are 8% of the country, right? 9%. But I know that there is enough that we are not getting on board with the suicide charge of the next Democratic candidate. I would rather lose the election to J.D. Vance. Let's all commit a virtuous suicide as a nation. And we can find one candidate out there. Maybe they'll get 7% of the vote, but they won't be a spoiler. They can stand for the American proposition. And they can talk about democracy, and they can talk about liberty, and they can talk about the ideas and the ideals of the country. And though we will lose, those ideas can be packaged with a ribbon, put around them as a historical testament and memory for who we are when some better generation in the future comes along that has the wherewithal to unwind this and to stop it, to repudiate it, and to raise up something better in its place. That's what I'm for. Because there's no way I'm getting back on board behind the people that are the architects of this disaster that brought us Donald Trump. And the people that brought us Donald Trump are the people around Chuck Schumer and the people around Joe Biden and the people around Kamala Harris. That's who did it.
Steve, I got to go talk to Jacob Soboroff because he's got out at 6, but I always love talking to you. Let's do it again soon. Can we?
Absolutely. Of course. And I will be on time.
Yeah. Steve was on a phone call and lost track of time, which
I did.
Like, dagger in my heart. But thank you for coming, even though you were a bit late. And yeah, we got a lot more to talk about. I hope that there's some other alternative route than the one you just described.
We cannot be hostages on both sides, right? We're hostages by one party and the other.
Love you. Got to go. All right. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye, Steve.